Welcome to the Teaching Autism and Special Education Community Podcast. Hi, I'm Nikki, a passionate special educator, autism advocate, resource creator with over a decade of experience, and you may know me as the face behind Teaching Autism. This podcast is your go-to place for practical tips, hands-on strategies, and inspiring and funny stories to support special educators all around the world, whether it's building independence, creating engaging lessons, or finding that elusive work-life balance. I'm here to help you thrive inside and outside of the classroom. Let's dive into today's episode and make a difference together. Hey teacher friend, and welcome back to the Teaching Autism and Special Education podcast. Alright, some real talk today. We all know that behaviour data is important. We've been told it's essential for understanding patterns, supporting IEPs, and creating effective behaviour plans. But let's be honest, sometimes behaviour data feels like an extra job on top of everything else. You track it, you colour code it, you graph it, and then think, okay, what now? So today's episode is all about how to actually interpret behaviour data, what it really tells you, what it doesn't, and how to use it to make real change. Because collecting data is only the first step. The magic happens when we can read that data and turn it into insight. So, why we take behaviour data in the first place. Let's start with a quick reminder that the goal of behaviour data isn't to prove that a student has a problem. It is to understand the why behind the behaviour so that we can make things better. Data isn't about judgment, it's about information. Every tally, every note, every ABC chart entry is a little piece of a bigger story. And when you put those pieces together, you can finally see what the student is trying to communicate. So our goal today is to help you see that story clearly. Now, step number one, first of all, you need to know what kind of data you're looking at. So before we interpret anything, we have to know what we've got. And there are a few main types of behavior data you'll come across. So you'll have frequency data, which is how often the behavior happens. You'll have duration data, which is how long it lasts. You'll have latency data, which is how long it takes to respond to a request. And then you've got the ABC data, what happened before, during, and after. Each one gives you a different piece of the puzzle. So, for example, if the behavior happens frequently but doesn't last long, you might be looking at a triggered reaction, not a sustained meltdown. If it lasts a long time but happens rarely, the issue might be recovery and not the trigger itself. So, the first rule of interpreting behavior data is look at the type of data before jumping to conclusions. And step number two, do not get trapped in numbers alone. Now, here is where so many teachers get tripped up. We collect all these numbers and these charts, but we forget the most important part, and that is context. Numbers tell you what is happening, but the context tells you why. So let's say your chart shows that a student screamed 5 times during math. If you only look at the number 5, you might think math is a problem. But if you dig deeper, maybe those 5 incidents all happened during transitions, when materials changed or noise levels rose or a preferred aid wasn't there. So the takeaway is not that they hate math, it's that they struggle with changes and unpredictability. So that's a big difference. So always ask yourself, what is happening around the behavior that the data can't show me? Because that's where the real insight lives. And step number 3, I want you to look for trends. So not one-offs. Behavior data is only powerful when you are able to look for patterns over time. If a student has one bad day, that's life. If the same pattern happens every Monday or every day after lunch or whenever there's a fire drill, now you've got a trend. And trends help you to predict and prevent. So try color coding your data by day or by activity. And what you're going to start seeing are patterns like escalation happens when routine changes, outbursts increase at the end of the week, duration shortens when visuals are used. Trends help you move from reactive to proactive. So instead of thinking, why did this happen again? You start thinking, I know when this usually happens, and here's what I can do next time. Step number 4, beware of misleading data. So here's the tricky part. Behavior data can actually mislead you if you're not careful. So let's look at a few common traps. If you're only recording extreme incidents and you only collect that data on major meltdowns, you miss the early signs that lead up to them. So this data will make it look like it came out of nowhere, but it didn't. If there's inconsistent recording, so if different staff record data differently, your patterns are not going to be accurate. You might think behavior increased when it was just tracked more closely that week. Ignore the certain events. A student's behavior might spike because of something outside your classroom. Poor sleep, hunger, medication changes. If you only track in-class variables, you might actually misidentify the cause. And counting instead of describing. Frequency alone doesn't tell you intensity or function. A student could have 10 small refusals or one major meltdown. Those are not equal, even though the number looks higher. So whenever you interpret data, pair the numbers with your notes, observations, and gut teacher instincts, because data is a tool and not the full story. Step number 5, focus on function, not just form. So you've heard this before. Every behavior has a function. It's either to get something or to avoid something. So the 4 classic functions are escape avoidance, attention, access to a tangible, or sensory regulation. So when you look at your data, I want you to ask yourself, what is this behavior doing for the student? If the data shows that behavior always happens when demands increase, then it's probably escape. If it happens when adults walk away, it's likely attention seeking. If it happens randomly but with sensory triggers, light, sounds, textures, it's sensory. Once you identify the function, you can then actually plan meaningful supports because you're addressing the need and not just the behavior. Step number 6, graph it, but keep it simple. You don't need fancy charts. A simple line graph or bar chart can actually reveal a lot. So look at your data visually. Are behaviors increasing? Are they decreasing? Are they staying the same? Are they shorter in duration now than before? Did they drop after a specific strategy was introduced? Visual patterns make progress or problems stand out. And remember that stability is progress too. So if behaviors aren't escalating anymore, that's still a win, even if they're not gone. Step number 7, pair data with reflection. So here's a quick reflection cycle I use when reviewing behavior data. So 1, what is happening the most often? Is it shouting, running, refusal? When and where does it happen? The time, the activity, and the setting. Who is involved? Is it the same staff member, the peer, the group size? Why might it be happening? Is it sensory? Is it communication? Is it routine? And what strategies have we tried and how did they work? So again, compare that before and after on the chart, because what this does is it's going to stop you from reacting emotionally to data, and it's going to help you make some data-driven, compassionate decisions. Step number 8, I want you to use your data to adjust supports and not blame. So behavior data should never be used to say, look how bad this week was. It should say, okay, something really isn't working. What can we tweak? You might discover that the task was too long. The environment was overstimulating. The reinforcement system just wasn't motivating. The visual support wasn't clear enough. And each insight is going to give you a new place to intervene. And this is the beauty of interpreting data, because it turns that overwhelm into direction. Step number 9, celebrate the subtle wins. So one of my favorite things to do when I'm reviewing data is to look for micro progress. So maybe the number of incidents stayed the same, but the duration dropped by half, or the recovery time after an incident is quicker, or the student is accepting help sooner. Those subtle shifts show that your strategies are working, even if the big numbers haven't moved yet, and always celebrate those because they matter. Step number 10 is to communicate the story clearly. When you share behavior data with parents, colleagues, administrators, I want you to focus on storytelling and not statistics. So instead of saying, well, they had 8 incidents this week, you could say, we noticed that transitions to lunch remain difficult, but the recovery time has improved and they can now calm in under 5 minutes with sensory tools. See how much more helpful that is, because you're sharing growth, you're identifying needs, and you're building trust, all from the same data. Data is more powerful when it leads to empathy and not alarm and panic. Step number 11, check for equity and perspective. So this one's more advanced, but still so important, because sometimes behavior data reflects our biases more than our students' behavior. So, for example, Are we recording more data for one student because they're louder but ignoring quiet refusals from others? Are there cultural communication styles or neurodivergent traits that are being misread as defiance? Always check your lens. Is this behaviour truly unsafe or just unexpected? And that reflection will keep that data ethical and inclusive. And finally, step number 12, turn data into action. So this is the fun part. Use your data to actually make change. When you've spotted trends, functions, and context, I want you to ask, what support can I put in before the trigger? How can I modify the environment or the instruction? What replacement skills can I teach? How will I know if the change is working? And then I want you to go back and collect that data again and compare. And that's how behavior support evolves over time. It's not about perfection, it's about the direction. So the next time that you're staring at a spreadsheet full of numbers, I want you to remember this. Behavior data isn't about how many times a student did something wrong. It's a language and you're learning to translate it. So when you are able to interpret it in the right way, you'll no longer see them as problems, but you're going to start to see the patterns. And then from those patterns, you can create change. So don't get caught in the numbers. Look for the story. Behind every tally mark is a student trying to tell you something. And we have to really listen to this. You're doing amazing work, teacher friend. Keep collecting, reflecting, and trusting your instincts. You're not just tracking behaviour, you're building understanding. Thank you for joining me and listening to my podcast today. I hope you found it helpful, and I'll speak to you again soon.